Well, thank you for taking the time here to join us today in talking a little bit about the differences between a dedicated and a multi-tenant cloud. There's a lot of confusion in the industry, and I'll tell you, I'm a little frustrated by it. I have worked and I have been a federal employee for almost 17 years, serving the federal government, and then I've been in the commercial world for about 10 years as well. Actually, more than that, more like 15 years now. So when vendors start to confuse things in the industry, that kind of frustrates me a little bit. So I apologize if there's a little bit of that twist to this video today, but I want to make sure that we're all pretty clear here about the difference between dedicated and multi-tenant clouds. You know, it's kind of funny when the industry stretches in one way or the other. When a multi-tenant cloud or a quote-unquote public cloud is perceived to be less secure, now everybody has private clouds. And that's what we're kind of seeing in the industry today. And so let's talk about some of those differences. And what I'm drawing on the screen today are some of those core components within a cloud infrastructure. So starting there at the top, of course, inside, remember this is in a cloud environment, so it doesn't matter who you get this from, they're going to have these core components. Now some of them may change, but they're going to have these components. And so at the very top there you see servers, you see network, firewalls, and storage. All of these are what we call core components of any compute environment. Doesn't necessarily have to be a cloud, could be any IT environment. Let me just write those out here real quickly for us here so we kind of keep track. So this is the core of the environment. We're not here to talk about these core components today. Let's move that over a little bit and start drawing in some facilities here. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me start over here. Let's start drawing in some facilities or customers that would use this. Now I refer to these as agencies because remember primarily I have worked with the federal government, and so everything's an agency to me, but these could be customers. It doesn't really matter. And remember, we want to make sure that we understand what the components are that are being used. So one vendor tends to like to talk about, and I'm not going to name any names here, but one vendor loves to talk about their dedicated cloud as a server. So, and granted, they do offer a server-based cloud that is dedicated, meaning that they have a cloud infrastructure that you can access from your facility, and you can get a dedicated server so that all of the VMs are on your server. You won't have your virtual machine shared with any other servers. Of course, now think about that, because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a cloud in a public environment as a multi-tenant cloud, because now we're really isolating our performance. Now this vendor that uses the word dedicated too often, in my opinion, also has challenges with their servers because they have single network cards in them, for example. And so there's a lot of the fine print that you don't really see. But what do they have as shared in the environment? They have multi-tenant solutions within their environment. So you can have the server, or components, excuse me, you can have the server as a dedicated physical server, absolutely, no doubt about it, can be in the cloud. But things like networks, firewalls, and storage, all of those components are shared within the infrastructure. So you remember, you have dedicated server, and we're all good with that. But everything else outside of the server is multi-tenant. So you have to begin to ask yourself, I have a dedicated server, I have shared network, shared firewall, shared storage, shared everything else. Am I a dedicated cloud or not? And so the question here, let me just draw that on the board here. Are you a dedicated cloud if over 75% of your cloud components are shared in a multi-tenant environment? Well, that answer should be pretty simple to most of us. this is not a dedicated cloud. What it is it has some attributes of a dedicated cloud, but it is truly a multi-tenant environment. So let's go ahead and draw to the next example that we have here. So we have agency A, servers, dedicated. Let's erase all that and start over again. Again, we're using, to the left, we've just pushed that picture off of the whiteboard for a moment, but we're still using those primary components of a cloud environment. Remember, those include the server, the storage, the firewall, the network. Those are our core components. And let's just draw those out here real quick. Again, we're going to have agency A. We have the network. We have the firewall we're going to draw in there. We're going to draw in storage as well. So we have a little disk there, storage environment. So all of those things are individual components. Okay, so let's go ahead and color that in a little bit, make it look a little distinct within the environment. Remember, this is what we call a hosted cloud environment. So this environment has all of its cloud resources local to that agency. This is a, not hosted. I used the word hosted. I'm incorrect. This is an on-premise cloud. So those of you that weren't listening, hopefully you caught that. So this is an on-premise cloud, right? We have the cloud. It's sitting on-premise within our agency or within our business, dedicated resources just for us. Now, of course, you can ask yourself, well, is that really much different than an IT infrastructure? There are components and functionality that is different. I have other videos that you should watch related to that. But this is certainly a dedicated cloud that is on site. Dedicated cloud that is on site. What makes it dedicated? All of its components are isolated to that user. Now that user, that agency could share that information with other agencies, right? They could become a multi-tenant provider themselves if they wanted to. This could be a dedicated cloud, and they could offer out multi-tenant services to other clouds, certainly possible. But this, as we draw it here, is dedicated on-premise on the right. And what I'm drawing here is an example of a dedicated hosted environment. So again, a dedicated environment. Notice the components that are making up this cloud. Well, wait a minute, erase that. Okay, no, dedicated hosted, that's fine. And we have the server, the network, the disk, and the firewall. The agency can connect to that, and it is a dedicated hosted environment. No resources. Notice there are no lines going to the left-hand side. We know this because we can secure this environment with firewalls, and we stop any other agency from attaching to our resources in our dedicated cloud. A little different than the first example that we drew on the board. So this is agency B wants to get cloud resources. They get it from the multi-tenant environment. Again, the multi-tenant environment that I'm highlighting in yellow off to the left of your screen there. The dedicated cloud stays isolated for agency A. Only agency A has access to their dedicated cloud. So, dedicated cloud again. I know I keep repeating this, and for some of you, you're going to write comments like, why does he keep saying that? Because for some reason, this is a huge confusion for folks. Dedicated cloud, dedicated and isolated resources. That is what a dedicated cloud is. So, is this a dedicated cloud where we have isolated resources serving agency A? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. We have a dedicated cloud going from agency A to a hosted environment. We also have a dedicated cloud going from agency A to an on-premise environment. Both of those considered a dedicated cloud. The cloud for agency B, which we'll erase here, that is an example of a multi-tenant environment. So, what do we have to remember? No dependencies on a multi-tenant cloud, meaning that there is no reach back, no phone home, no shared resources, 100% dedicated and isolated resources. That means a dedicated cloud. Anything short of that, it's not dedicated.